Hi, my name is Rose, and one of my hobbies is sewing. One of the reasons why I love sewing so much is that you really have no limits to your creativity. I wanted to show you guys how to make a skirt without a pattern because I don't think that you should need to buy a pattern in order to make something really cool. So the first thing I did is I measured where I wanted my skirt to hit on me and added a few inches. I ended up adding 3 inches and it was a bit shorter than I wanted, so I would say add at least 5 to be safe. So the skirt length I decided on was 26 inches, so I divided that by 3, but not evenly because I wanted the bottom tier to be longer than the other two. These are the measurements I used in inches: 11 by 90 for the bottom tier, 9 by 70 for the middle tier, 6 by 65 for the top tier, and the waistband was 4 by 80. I actually cut 6 inches for the waistband, but I ended up cutting off a lot because I didn't want it as fat as I originally made it. When you're done cutting out your skirt, you should have 4 panels that are all different sizes. The first thing I did to make this tiered skirt was to hem all of my raw edges. You don't necessarily have to do this if you have a serger, but I personally like to hem everything just to be safe. I knew that I would have a lot of unfinished edges on the inside of my skirt and I didn't want them to fray. For this, I used a rolled hem, which if you didn't know, that means you fold it over once and then again. Some people like to freehand it. I usually do because I'm lazy. But the proper way to do it is to fold it over and iron it first so that you have a nice clean edge to work with. It makes the actual sewing part a lot easier. I hemmed all the long ends and then I decided to hem the short ends as well. One thing that you should make sure when you're doing this is that you're hemming everything on the same side, because I have definitely had times when I accidentally hemmed the wrong side and then had to rip it out. When I was done hemming everything, I ironed it all out because my fabric was a little bit wrinkly from sitting in my sewing room for so long, and once I finished the skirt it would be a lot harder to iron, so I decided to just iron it right away because that just makes it a lot easier. After I finished all of the raw edges, it was time to gather my skirt. How I did this is lengthening my stitch and just doing a straight stitch all the way down the top. Be sure not to backstitch for this because that will ruin the effect. Once I went all the way down, I grabbed the top thread and I very gently pulled it. And when you do that, you will gather your skirt. I did end up breaking my thread, which is very unfortunate because that doesn't let you gather it anymore. So just because it was a very small section of the skirt that did not get gathered because of this, I just cheated and put pleats, and you really can't tell where it is. So if you do that, no worries, you can pleat it, but if it's a large amount, I would definitely suggest doing it over again. When I was done gathering the bottom tier, I lined it up with the second tier, made sure it was the same size, and pinned it all together. After pinning, I sewed it in place, and then I repeated this process for the next 2. Then I took a small break from pleating and gathering and made my waistband. I took the piece of fabric that I cut out for it, folded it in half, and ironed it all down. Then I pinned it together. It is actually a lot easier to sew a waistband when you go through the trouble of doing this. Once that was completed, I held the waistband up to my body and marked where I wanted it to hit. Then I pinned and sewed it to the top tier using the same technique I used before. One thing to note is that I did not make the top tier go all the way across the waistband because this is actually a tying waistband. I only had it go where my marks were, no further. When I was all done with this, the last step is just taking your finished skirt and sewing along the back. I left a small gap at the top so that I could get it on and off, and then I did not have to finish that or the hem because I had already hemmed all of my raw edges. So I was completely done with the skirt. This is a tying skirt, so you don't even have to put any zippers or buttons or anything like that. You just tie it up in the back, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It only took me 3 hours to make, and you can do it. Whatever you can put your mind to and put your scissors to, you can create. Happy sewing!